Frazer, and I'm the author and illustrator behind Art Makers Empowered Embroidery, published by Walter Foster. And today I'm in the art studio to demonstrate 3 different methods of transferring patterns to fabric for embroidery. I wanted to talk about transferring the patterns to fabric because I think sometimes this can be a hurdle to getting started on your projects. I know for me in the past that this has been the case. And unless you have fabric that has been pre-printed with the design, you're going to need to get the pattern from the book onto your fabric. In this video, I'll demonstrate 3 different methods of transfer and also share the materials that I like to use along the way. If you already have the book Empowered Embroidery, you can follow along starting on page 32 in the chapter Transferring Designs to Fabric. Are you ready? Let's get started. Before committing to any of the methods of transfer that I'm going to outline here, it's important to test each method on a piece of scrap fabric. What works for me on my fabric may work slightly differently for you on your fabric. Especially with the transfer pencils and pens and markers, I think it's important to just make sure before you start on your project on your beautiful fabric that you just test it on a scrap to see if the marker stays around when you wash it out, or if you have any issues with the water-soluble stabilizer, just as a precaution. Different types of fabric work differently with different types of transfer. So I think it's important to just do a quick test. It could be 5 or 10 minutes. That's all it's going to take to test out the methods that you're going to use on your fabric. I think in the long run, this is going to save time, money, and heartache. There are quite a few different types of water-soluble stabilizer, but my favorite is Sticky Fabrisolvi by Sulky. It's printable, you can draw on it, and best of all, it sticks to your fabric and it's repositionable. Here, I'm scanning the image of Maya Angelou and printing it onto my stabilizer. I printed this image on one piece of stabilizer, which is easy to peel and stick onto your fabric. I prefer to use a larger hoop so that I can see the overall progress on my embroidery, but feel free to do what works best for you. You may need to pin down the stabilizer to keep it from moving around on the fabric. It's sticky, but it's also repositionable. You can also print at a size larger than 8.5 by 11, as I did here. So I needed to print onto 2 sheets of stabilizer and piece it together. If you are using 2 pieces of stabilizer, simply trim off the excess, position the 2 pieces so they overlap by about 1 inch to 2 inches, and reposition as needed. Simply scan or copy, print, peel off the backing and stick it onto your fabric. And then you can pin the pieces in place. I use small pins. This keeps the stabilizer in place and also keeps it from buckling as I stitch. Again, I prefer to use a larger hoop so I can see the overall progress of my embroidery. Do what works best for you though. And remember, the stabilizer is water soluble, so any drop of water will start to dissolve the stabilizer. If it does get wet, simply let it dry and then continue stitching. I find it helpful to start stitching from the center of the image outward to keep the stabilizer from buckling. Once you've got some stitches in place, feel free to move around the embroidery as you like. Each chapter in Empowered Embroidery comes with some other smaller sketches that you can copy or scan and use to create new compositions. Feel free to research and draw your own imagery too. The process is the same. Scan or copy, trim, peel and stick, and then start stitching. Another way to use water-soluble stabilizer is to trace the design onto the stabilizer. Simply print out the image and tape it to your light source. Here I'm using a light box, but you can also use a window. Then tape the stabilizer in place on top of the design. Trace the image carefully using your pen or pencil of choice. Here I'm using a Pentel Technica ballpoint pen. Again, be sure to test this on a scrap of fabric. When you wash the stabilizer out, you don't want the ink or graphite to stain your beautiful fabric. And here are a few different pens and pencils that I like to use. Again, always test these out on your fabric. After you're done stitching, it's time to remove the stabilizer. After stitching the design, remove the fabric from the hoop and trim off any excess stabilizer, taking care not to cut your stitches. Doing this will just help speed up the process of dissolving the stabilizer. Start by rinsing the fabric in warm water. You can use a soft toothbrush to gently brush away any excess stabilizer. You can also massage the stabilizer gently with your fingers to help loosen it up from any small cracks and crevices. You can then fill a large, clean bowl with warm water and gently agitate the fabric to remove any remaining stabilizer. You may need to repeat this a few times until the water is clear. You can also let the fabric soak for anywhere from 15 minutes up to a couple hours to make sure that all of the stabilizer is dissolved. After completely removing the stabilizer, lay and pin your project flat to dry. And after the fabric has dried, you can go back and add more details to the embroidery, such as beading or more embroidery stitches. To begin method 2, direct tracing onto fabric, you'll need to print or copy the design at the size you want to embroider and tape it to your light source. Here I'm using my light box, but you could also use a bright window. Once you have your image taped to the light source, place your fabric in a hoop that's large enough to fit all of the design. One of the issues with using this method to transfer the pattern to your fabric is that if the fabric is too dark, you won't be able to see the image through the fabric. In this case, you'll just have to switch to a lighter colored fabric for your embroidery. You may have to adjust the fabric a little bit to get it taut enough to trace the lines accurately. Here I'm using a black Frixion pen to carefully trace the outlines of the face. As with any other method, just make sure that you test the pen or pencil that you're using to transfer on your fabric. I love Frixion pens because they come in a rainbow of colors, and you can switch to a pink or a purple or an orange for different areas of the embroidery. And because Frixion pens use heat or friction to remove the lines, you can use the eraser side to remove any mistakes that you make along the way. However, I like to use a hot iron to remove any lines from the Frixion pen that I want to get rid of. I think this is a more thorough way to get rid of any mistakes that you make. Another method of direct tracing that I like to use is a water-soluble pen. I prefer to use a water-soluble pen versus a marker to get more precise marks on my fabric. When using a water-soluble pen, just remember that if your fabric gets wet, the lines will disappear. After you're finished carefully tracing the image, you can use a spray bottle or soak the fabric in water after you're done embroidering to remove the lines. To begin method 3, hot iron transfer, you'll need to print or copy your design in reverse. Here I'm printing some of the alternative sketches from the Maya Angelou chapter. Then tape the design to your light source. Here I'm using a light box, but again you can use a bright window. And then tape a piece of blank paper on top of that. I'm using regular copy paper, but you can also try tracing paper as well to get the desired result. Once you have your image and blank paper taped in place, you'll need to trace the design carefully using an iron-on transfer pen, pencil, or marker. I've tested quite a few different transfer pencils and markers, and I found that the one I like the very best is from Sublime Stitching. They come in black and a rainbow of colors too. And yes, again, make sure that you test this method of transfer on a piece of your scrap fabric. Keep in mind that once the design is transferred to your fabric, the ink is permanent. After the design is traced, cut off any excess paper around the image. To prepare the fabric for transfer, preheat your fabric with a hot iron. Then, place the traced image onto the fabric and carefully iron it. While ironing, hold the paper in place and move the iron around carefully, pressing firmly. Lift up the paper to see if the image has transferred, and if not, continue to iron until the entire image is transferred to the fabric. Put your fabric in a hoop and you're ready to start stitching. So we just covered 3 methods of transfer: water-soluble stabilizer, direct tracing, and hot pen transfer. I hope that you'll take the opportunity to try out each method for different projects. I know that for me, my favorite method, I'm just going to say it, is water-soluble stabilizer. Thank you so much for watching. You can purchase my book, Empowered Embroidery, wherever books are sold. And don't forget to post your projects on social media and tag me at Amy L. Frazer and #Walter Foster.